Emily Carter's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., shattering the fragile calm of her small bedroom. The Texas sun had yet to rise, and the air smelled faintly of dust and ozone, the remnants of last night's summer storm. She rubbed her eyes and listened to the soft, persistent cries of her 6-year-old daughter Lily coming from the room down the hall. Emily swung her legs over the side of the bed, feeling the familiar ache of exhaustion in her lower back. Another 12-hour night shift had left her drained, but there was no time to linger in bed. She quietly tiptoed down the hallway, careful not to wake Lily, and opened her daughter's bedroom door. Lily was curled up under a patchwork quilt, the tiny figure trembling slightly in her sleep. Emily crouched beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Morning, sweetie," she whispered, her voice barely audible, tinged with both love and fatigue. Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes, her innocence a stark contrast to the harshness of the world outside their home. Emily's small apartment was modest but cozy. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's coffee, a habit she clung to like a lifeline. She poured herself a mug and sipped slowly, savoring the warmth that barely registered against the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. Bills lay stacked neatly on the counter, overdue electricity, rent, and the medical supplies for Lily's school. Each one a reminder of the precarious tightrope she walked every day. 2 mornings in a row, Emily had noticed a black pickup truck parked across the street. Each time she glanced out the window, it seemed to linger a little too long, its darkened windows reflecting nothing and everything at once. She tried to dismiss the uneasy feeling that settled in her chest. Maybe it was just coincidence, she told herself. Maybe someone else in the neighborhood had similar schedules, or maybe she was letting paranoia creep in after a long week. But the instinctive chill, deep and visceral, refused to go away. After waking Lily and helping her dress for school, Emily packed a small breakfast, toast, a slice of fruit, and a juice box. She sat beside her daughter at the small kitchen table, trying to create an ordinary morning despite the undercurrent of unease. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, forcing a smile. Lily nodded, sleepy eyes wide, as she rubbed her hands over her face. Her small fingers trembled slightly, though Emily didn't notice at first, lost in her own swirl and anxiety. By 6:15, Emily had Lily bundled into her tiny car seat and fastened the seatbelt with careful precision. She kissed the top of her daughter's head, inhaling the familiar scent of shampoo and baby lotion. Every day, she reminded herself that the smallest moments mattered: a shared breakfast, a quiet conversation, a hug that lingered. These were the moments she clung to in a life that demanded toughness she wasn't sure she had. The drive to Lily's school was quiet, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engine. Emily's eyes flicked repeatedly to the rearview mirror, scanning for anything unusual. Her pulse quickened when she caught a glimpse of a black pickup truck parked several houses back, its presence too conspicuous to ignore. She blinked and forced herself to focus on the road, repeating the mantra she had begun using: "Just breathe. Just breathe." After dropping Lily off and waving goodbye, Emily headed toward the hospital for her night shift. The streets were still empty, a ghostly calm settling over the neighborhood. In moments like these, Emily felt the duality of her life, the ordinary, tender moments with her daughter, and the dangerous, unpredictable world that awaited her outside the safety of home. The hospital loomed ahead, its fluorescent lights cutting a stark swath across the parking lot. Inside the hospital, Emily's colleagues greeted her with the usual morning nods and half-smiles. She exchanged pleasantries while scanning the bulletin board for updates, patient schedules, emergency notices, and the occasional security alert. Her department had seen a spike in robberies and break-ins in recent months, though nothing that had directly affected the staff. Yet, a whisper of dread ran through her as she placed her bag in her locker. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting, planning. The first patients arrived, groaning with pain, fear, and fatigue. Emily's focus shifted immediately. The adrenaline from worry replaced by the professional urgency she had honed over years of night shifts. She administered medications, checked vital signs, and offered gentle reassurance, all while her mind lingered on the strange black truck and the faint echoes of breathing from the mysterious phone call 2 days prior. Something was coming. She felt it in her bones, though she couldn't articulate what. Midway through her shift, Emily took a short break in the dimly lit staff lounge. She sipped lukewarm coffee, staring out the window at the empty parking lot. The black pickup wasn't there, but she knew appearances could be deceiving. The world had a way of lulling people into false security before striking with precision. Her fingers traced the rim of the coffee cup, the ceramic cool beneath her touch. Each sip was both a comfort and a reminder that danger could strike anywhere, even here. By the end of her shift, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Her uniform was damp with sweat from running between patients, yet her mind never stopped racing. She thought of Lily sleeping at home, of the ordinary morning they had shared, and of the strange feeling of being watched. Emily knew her life was balancing on a knife's edge, and that ordinary days could end in seconds. She steeled herself, unknowingly preparing for the trial by fire that awaited her just beyond the horizon. As Emily drove home in the pre-dawn hours, she rehearsed scenarios in her mind. What would she do if someone broke into her home? How would she protect Lily? The questions were terrifying, yet necessary. She parked her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, and looked up at the quiet street. The black pickup was gone, but the fear lingered. Emily whispered a quiet prayer to herself and Lily, a small shield against the unknown. She didn't know it yet, but her life and her courage would be tested in ways she had never imagined. Back in her apartment, Emily tucked Lily back into bed, brushing the hair from her daughter's forehead once more. "Mommy's here," she whispered, though she didn't feel entirely certain of that herself. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, staring out into the early morning darkness, waiting, watching, and listening. Something told her that ordinary mornings were over. A storm was coming, and she would need every ounce of strength she had to survive. Emily Carter had barely slept the night after noticing the black pickup outside her home again. Her body was drained, but her mind refused to rest. Every creak of the apartment seemed amplified, every shadow cast by the streetlight a potential threat. Lily slept fitfully, murmuring in her dreams, and Emily found herself hovering at the edge of the bedroom doorway, heart hammering. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, just imagination, just exhaustion, but the memory of the strange, silent phone call with heavy breathing 2 days ago lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. That morning, Emily's neighbor, Tom, stopped her in the hallway while she was carrying Lily's lunch to the car. Tom was a man in his late 40s, a retired firefighter with a deep, gravelly voice and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Emily," he said, glancing around as if the walls themselves might be listening, "you need to be careful. There's been talk in the neighborhood. The Iron Fangs have been hitting houses again. Nurses, teachers, anyone they think might have something." Emily nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, fear tightened its grip. The Iron Fangs were notorious, a small but ruthless gang known for breaking into homes, targeting vulnerable people, and disappearing before anyone could catch them. The idea that they might come after her and Lily was terrifying, but she had no time to dwell. Life had to go on, and she had responsibilities, starting with getting Lily to school on time. That night, after another exhausting shift at the hospital, Emily returned home, parking her car cautiously, scanning the streets as she stepped out. Her heart leapt when she saw movement near the back of her apartment. A shadow flitted past the edge of the fence, and she froze. There was no time to think. Instinct took over. She pulled her phone from her pocket, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "There's someone outside." "Back door," she whispered into the receiver, trying not to let panic dominate her voice. By the time the police arrived, the intruder had vanished. Emily stood on her porch, staring at the empty street, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The officer gave a perfunctory nod, saying, "Probably just a kid looking for trouble," but Emily knew better. Her heart refused to settle, her gut screaming that this wasn't random. Something darker was stirring, and she had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't stop at an attempted break-in. That night, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, Lily asleep in the next room, staring at the small handgun she had reluctantly purchased earlier that week. She had always been against guns, but desperation forced a change in her beliefs. This little weapon was her shield, her fragile barrier against the dangers lurking outside. Her hands shook as she loaded it, each click of the safety a reminder that she was taking responsibility for survival in a world that could turn violent in seconds. Sleep was impossible. Every sound in the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the whistle of wind against the window, made her flinch. Emily reviewed every possible scenario in her mind. What if they came back? What if Lily woke and screamed? What if the intruders were stronger, more skilled, more ruthless than she could imagine? The questions were endless, and yet she refused to give in to paralysis. Fear might be natural, Marcus had told her, but action was necessary. She would protect her daughter, no matter the cost. The next morning, Emily shared a quiet breakfast with Lily. The child's cheerful chatter about a school project contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in Emily's heart. She forced herself to smile, to appear calm, even though the anxiety gnawed at her from the inside. She reminded herself that the ordinary routines, the toast, the juice box, the laughter were anchors in a world that had suddenly felt fragile and dangerous. After dropping Lily at school, Emily stopped by the local shooting range. Marcus, the retired Marine who had agreed to teach her, greeted her with a firm handshake and a serious expression. "You look tense," he said. "Good. That tension will save your life if you learn to control it. Fear isn't the enemy, paralysis is." Emily nodded, gripping the rifle with trembling hands. Marcus guided her through stance, breathing, and sighting. He emphasized mental readiness above everything else. "This isn't about killing anyone," he said, his voice steady. "It's about being ready to survive, to act decisively when the seconds matter. You need to trust yourself. Trust your instincts." The lesson ended, but Emily's mind raced all the way home. She replayed the night's shadows, the black pickup truck, the eerie phone call, and the attempted break-in. Something told her these weren't coincidences, they were warnings. The iron fangs weren't just prowling. They were planning, and she was in their crosshairs. That night, Emily double-checked the locks on every door and window. She made sure the gun was fully loaded and within arm's reach. She even moved the furniture slightly, planning escape routes in case the worst happened. As she tucked Lily in, the little girl whispered, "Mommy, will anyone hurt us?" Emily held her close, forcing herself to smile through the fear. "No, sweetie. Mommy's here. Nothing will happen while I'm awake." But deep down, Emily knew that presence alone might not be enough. Hours passed in tense quiet. Emily lay awake, listening to the wind brushing against the building, the distant hum of cars, and the occasional creak from the floors above. Each sound made her jump. Each shadow seemed alive. She realized the ordinary life she had taken for granted, the calm mornings, the laughter, a sense of safety, was gone. The world outside had grown darker, more dangerous, and the burden of survival rested squarely on her shoulders. Then, just as she began to drift into an uneasy sleep, she heard it, tires screeching outside her window. Her heart froze. The black pickup truck? She couldn't be sure, but the sound triggered every alarm she had tried to ignore. Emily clutched her handgun tightly, listening intently as the noises faded into the distance. Relief washed over her for a fleeting moment, but she knew it was temporary. The shadows were moving closer, and she could no longer pretend that her ordinary life was safe. By dawn, Emily's resolve had hardened. She had to protect Lily at all costs. The peaceful mornings she had once taken for granted were over. Every moment was now a rehearsal for survival. She was determined not to be caught off guard again, determined to act decisively when the next threat arrived. The iron fangs were out there, and Emily knew the world had changed forever. Her ordinary life had vanished, replaced by the tense vigilance of someone who knew the danger could strike at any moment. Emily stared at the rising sun through the kitchen window, the warmth of the morning light doing little to calm the storm inside her. She had no idea when the next attack would come, or what form it would take. But she made a silent promise to herself. When it came, she would be ready. She would fight. She would protect her daughter. And in the moments that would decide their lives, she would not freeze. The mornings that followed felt like an uneasy truce. Emily Carter and her daughter Lily tried to resume a sense of normalcy, but every creak of the floor, every shadow cast by the streetlight, reminded Emily that the danger was never far. At school drop-offs, she scanned the streets obsessively. At work, she flinched at every unfamiliar noise. Each night, she lay awake, replaying the black pickup, the shadowy figures, the heavy-breath phone call. It was as if the ordinary world had been replaced by a stage set for a drama she couldn't escape. To regain some sense of control, Emily intensified her training. She had already purchased a small handgun, but she knew possession alone wasn't enough. She enrolled in a local shooting range, run by Marcus Grant, a retired Marine with years of combat experience. Marcus was gruff but disciplined, his presence commanding respect. The first day Emily arrived, she felt out of place. The smell of gun oil, the sharp report of pistols, and the intense focus of the other trainees made her nervous. She wondered if she was in over her head. Marcus sized her up quickly. "You're tense," he said, voice low and measured. "Good. That tension will save your life if you can control it. Fear isn't the enemy. Paralysis is." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. Marcus's lessons were unlike anything she had imagined. It wasn't just about aiming and shooting. It was about mental readiness, controlling panic, and making split-second decisions. "You need to learn to trust yourself," Marcus said as he demonstrated proper stance. "Seconds will decide your life. Your daughter's life. Don't wait for courage to appear. Decide, act, survive." She trained religiously. Every evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Emily practiced stances, sight alignment, and quick-draw maneuvers. Her hands ached, her shoulders burned, and sweat often ran down her temples, but she refused to quit. Marcus emphasized that readiness was both physical and mental. "The moment you hesitate, you die," he reminded her again and again. Emily absorbed every word, imagining scenarios where her quick reflexes could save both her life and Lily's. But training alone couldn't quiet the nagging anxiety. Every time the wind brushed against the window, she flinched. Every car that passed on the street felt suspicious. Her mind conjured faces behind darkened windows, hands on guns, and footsteps on the porch. It was exhausting. Yet Emily persisted, because the stakes were higher than her fear. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. Lily's safety depended entirely on her. At the hospital, Emily's colleagues noticed a difference. She seemed quieter, more focused, almost steely in her gaze. She would sometimes glance toward the windows, as if expecting someone to appear, and she was constantly alert, never allowing herself a single moment of distraction. Coworkers speculated that Emily was simply tired from long hours, but Marcus knew better. He saw someone preparing for a trial she hadn't yet faced, a test of courage, skill, and split-second decision-making. During one of her training sessions, Marcus introduced a mental exercise. He placed a timer on the counter and instructed Emily to simulate a sudden home invasion. She had to respond instinctively, without hesitation, shooting a target that popped up randomly. The first attempts were clumsy. Her hands shook, her heart raced, and panic crept in. But with repetition, she improved. By the end of the session, she was calm, deliberate, precise, and most importantly, ready to act. At home, she began implementing safety protocols. Locks were double-checked, escape routes mapped, and doors barricaded where possible. She rehearsed scenarios in her mind. What to do if someone broke in at night, how to protect Lily, how to communicate with the police quickly. It was meticulous, exhausting, and terrifying, but she felt a sense of control she hadn't had before. Every precaution, every repetition, every drop of sweat at the range built a shield around her family. Yet Emily couldn't ignore the signs outside her controlled environment. Shadows lingered near the street, the black pickup truck appeared again, and subtle disturbances hinted that the iron fangs were still watching. She wasn't imagining it. The neighborhood chatter confirmed her suspicions. Break-ins were increasing, and the gang was boldening. They weren't looking for easy targets anymore. They were hunting someone like her, someone with access to the hospital and a family they thought was vulnerable. Emily's personal life became a balance between ordinary moments with Lily and the relentless preparation for danger. She attended school events, helped with homework, and even managed to bake cookies with her daughter, all while carrying the weight of the looming threat. Lily noticed Emily's tension, but accepted the occasional distracted smiles. "Mommy," Lily asked one evening, "are the bad guys coming?" Emily hugged her tightly, kissing the top of her head. "No, sweetie. Mommy's here. Nothing will happen while I'm awake." Yet deep down, Emily understood that she could not guarantee safety forever. During her evening runs, Emily noticed subtle things that reminded her to remain vigilant. Footsteps that weren't hers. Cars parked too long. Shadows moving across windows in the distance. Each observation reinforced her belief that she was being watched. The calm before the storm was terrifying in its quietness. No phone call, no threat, but the air was heavy, pregnant with the tension of anticipation. Emily had to remain alert, even when everything appeared normal. As the nights grew longer, Emily developed a routine. She would check locks, arrange the furniture to maximize her tactical advantage, and rehearse her mental drills while tucking Lily into bed. She left lights on strategically to create shadows that might confuse intruders. She even practiced escaping from different rooms with Lily in her arms, timing every step. It was grueling work, but Emily's resolve hardened with each repetition. She was no longer the tired, scared single mother she had been weeks before. She was a woman preparing for the unthinkable. One evening, Marcus came over to evaluate her home setup. He moved through each room, observing and correcting Emily's plans. "Your positioning is good, but you need multiple escape routes," he said. "Always assume one route is compromised. Seconds matter." Emily absorbed every word, her anxiety mixing with a strange satisfaction. For the first time, she felt like she was taking control of her fate, rather than waiting for it to be decided by someone else. Despite all preparations, fear remained. Emily knew that training and safety measures could not eliminate danger entirely. She feared the unknown, the unpredictability, the men who had chosen her as their target. Yet she also felt a strange empowerment. Every drill, every lesson, every cautious glance out the window reinforced her belief that she could act decisively if the moment came. She would not freeze. She would survive. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, and watching her daughter's soft breathing, Emily sat by the window, staring into the darkness outside. The street was quiet, almost serene, but she didn't trust the calm. It was a deceptive lull, the calm before the storm. Somewhere out there, shadows moved. Somewhere out there, the threat loomed. Emily clenched her fists, feeling the resolve solidify in her chest. When the moment arrived, she would be ready. She would protect Lily. She would act in the seconds that mattered most. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, Emily allowed herself a small, private smile. The ordinary life she once knew was gone, replaced by preparation, vigilance, and determination. But within that new life, she had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. The storm was coming, and Emily Carter would meet it head-on. The night had an uneasy stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Emily Carter double-checked the locks on all doors and windows before sitting in her living room, her handgun within reach. Lily slept peacefully upstairs, unaware of the darkness creeping closer, unaware of the threat that had stalked them for weeks. Emily's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. Every minute stretched endlessly, the quiet amplifying her anxiety. The black pickup had not appeared tonight, but Emily knew better than to trust an absence of movement. Minutes passed, and the ordinary tension of her home turned electric with anticipation. A subtle scraping sound near the back door made Emily freeze. Her breath caught in her throat. Heart pounding, she whispered a silent prayer for protection, for time, for instinct. Slowly, she moved toward the kitchen window, peering through the blinds. Shadows shifted. 3 masked figures had appeared in her backyard, moving with deliberate precision. Emily's first instinct was to scream, but she remembered Marcus's lessons. Seconds could decide everything. She slid behind the counter, keeping her body low, her hands steady on the gun. Her mind raced through escape routes, each movement calculated and rehearsed. The intruders didn't hesitate. One of them approached the back door, testing the lock, while another moved around to the side of the house. Emily realized instantly they were professionals, not amateurs seeking random theft. This was a targeted attack. A sudden crash jolted Emily's attention. The door to the kitchen shuddered as the first intruder forced it open. The leader, a man she would later know as Rico, pressed a gun against her temple, his cold breath brushing her ear. "Where's the stash?" he demanded, voice low and threatening. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to stay calm. Seconds became a lifetime. Her eyes darted to Lily's bedroom door upstairs, to the layout of the kitchen, and to the exits she had memorized. The room was tense beyond words. Rico's companions flanked the doorway, weapons drawn. Emily felt the weight of decision pressing on her shoulders. She could comply, but she knew from Marcus's training that hesitation would be fatal. Her fingers tightened around the grip of her handgun, the cold metal grounding her in the reality of the moment. The fear that had been simmering for weeks now boiled into a clarity of purpose. Protect Lily. Survive. Act decisively. Time seemed to slow. Emily drew a slow, controlled breath, visualizing Marcus's instructions. She needed to create an opening, a momentary advantage. Pretending compliance, she moved her body slightly, shifting just enough to change her angle without alerting the intruders. Rico's attention wavered for a fraction of a second, and that fraction was everything. With deliberate precision, Emily fired. The crack of the gunshot shattered the silence, echoing through the small house. Rico stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder as he cried out. His accomplices reacted instantly, one lunging toward her while the other froze, assessing the sudden chaos. Emily fired again, her movements swift, rehearsed, and instinctive. Within seconds, the attacker lunged at her and was struck in the shoulder, collapsing in pain. The final intruder hesitated, then turned and fled into the night, disappearing into the shadows that had concealed them for so long. Silence returned, heavier this time, punctuated only by Emily's rapid breathing. She kept the gun raised, eyes scanning for any sign of return, any hidden threat. Slowly, she lowered the weapon and exhaled, relief and adrenaline flooding her system simultaneously. She had survived the invasion, and Lily was safe. Trembling, she climbed the stairs and checked on her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, tears mingling with the sweat on her forehead. "Mommy's here. You're safe." Emily called 911, her voice shaking, but controlled as she recounted the break-in and the attacker's escape. Officers arrived quickly, securing the area and taking her statement. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the ordeal began to ebb, leaving her exhausted and shaking. Neighbors peeked through windows, some in awe, some in fear. The news of what had happened would spread quickly, though Emily barely registered their murmurs. Her focus remained on Lily, on ensuring she was truly safe. As the police investigated, Emily reflected on what had just occurred. The lessons from Marcus, the countless hours of training, the rehearsed mental drills. Every moment of preparation had saved her life and her daughter's. The intruders had expected hesitation, but Emily had acted decisively, turning fear into action in the seconds that mattered most. It was over in less than 20 seconds, yet the impact would resonate for the rest of her life. The incident left Emily both empowered and shaken. She had faced death and survived, but the psychological weight of the invasion lingered. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt vulnerable despite her precautions. Marcus visited later that evening, assessing the aftermath and offering guidance. "You acted perfectly," he said, his voice steady. "You stayed calm, protected your daughter, and neutralized the threat. That's more than most could do." Emily nodded, pride and relief mingling with the lingering tremor of fear. The media arrived the following morning, reporters flashing cameras and asking questions. Emily answered carefully, describing the event without embellishment. Social media exploded with opinions, some calling her a hero, others questioning her use of a firearm. Emily barely noticed the noise. Her world had shrunk to the most important reality. Lily was unharmed, and they had survived a targeted attack by dangerous criminals. Everything else was secondary. That night, Emily sat by the window, watching the street. The black pickup truck was gone, but the threat remained. She knew the Iron Fangs would not easily forget the woman who had thwarted them. She thought about the seconds when Rico's gun had been pressed to her head, the moments when her decisions had determined life or death. Those seconds had revealed a strength she had not fully recognized in herself. Fear had not paralyzed her. It had sharpened her instincts, focusing every thought and movement on survival. Emily began to accept that her life had changed irrevocably. Ordinary mornings, casual routines, and the illusion of safety were gone. In their place was a life of vigilance, preparation, and readiness. She embraced the truth that she could never allow herself complacency again. Every night, every sound, every shadow was now a potential test, a reminder that survival was an active choice. She would no longer be caught unprepared. The invasion had also forged a deeper bond between Emily and Lily. The child had sensed the tension and danger, but Emily's calm under pressure provided reassurance. Lily's trust and dependence became both motivation and responsibility. Emily knew that her courage in the seconds of danger had not only saved her daughter's life, but had also modeled resilience, strength, and the importance of decisive action in the face of fear. As the house grew quiet once more, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. The fear that had consumed her for weeks had been transformed into something else: confidence, clarity, and resolve. The intruders had underestimated her, and that miscalculation had been their undoing. Yet Emily understood that this victory was only temporary. The world outside her doors remained unpredictable, and the Iron Fangs were still out there, likely plotting their next move. She would remain vigilant, ready to protect what mattered most. Emily finally climbed the stairs to check on Lily once more. The child slept soundly, oblivious to the chaos of the night. Emily kissed her forehead, whispering a promise she felt in her bones. She would always protect her, no matter the cost. The seconds had mattered, and she had acted. The ordinary life she had once known was gone, but in its place was a new life, one defined by courage, quick thinking, and unwavering resolve. The night had ended, but the echoes of chaos lingered in Emily Carter's mind. Her hands still trembled as she clutched the handgun, now empty from the frantic firing that had saved her life and her daughter's. The air in the house was thick with tension, charged with the residue of adrenaline and fear. The intruders had fled, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Emily and Lily in the fragile safety of their home. Yet for Emily, there was no relief, only the recognition that life could change in the blink of an eye. Lily stirred in her bed, murmuring in her sleep. Emily leaned over, brushing the strands of hair from her daughter's forehead. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, though her voice quivered despite her efforts at calm. "Mommy's here. You're safe." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she watched Lily sleep, the child's innocence a stark contrast to the violence that had invaded their lives. She realized, with a sinking clarity, that nothing would ever make her complacent again. Every second mattered. Every decision counted. Emily sat down on the couch, the weight of what had just happened settling over her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the attack was fading, leaving exhaustion and raw emotion in its place. She remembered the precise moment Rico had pressed the gun to her head, the milliseconds when her mind had frozen and then, miraculously, acted. Marcus's words echoed in her memory. "Seconds will decide your life. Decide, act, survive." That brief moment of decision had saved both her life and Lily's. The sound of sirens pierced the night, drawing Emily's attention to the approaching police cars. Officers entered the house, securing the perimeter and calling for backup. Emily explained what had happened, her voice steady despite the lingering tremor of fear. The first responder, a young officer with a serious expression, nodded and took notes. He glanced at Lily sleeping peacefully upstairs, and then back at Emily. "You acted fast," he said quietly. "You could have been hurt. Or worse." Emily nodded, unable to articulate the mixture of fear and relief churning in her chest. The officers scoured the home for evidence, checking doors, windows, and the surrounding yard. Emily cooperated fully, pointing out where the intruders had entered, where they had moved, and where she had fired her weapon. She recounted every detail, each motion, each decision, knowing that this account might one day be scrutinized in court. Her mind replayed the sequence of events repeatedly, each time marveling at how quickly fear had transformed into precise, life-saving action. Outside, neighbors gathered silently, drawn by the flashing lights and the commotion. Some whispered in awe, others in fear, as the reality of what had occurred sank in. Emily barely registered their presence. Her world had contracted to the most vital truth. She had acted when seconds mattered. She had protected her daughter. That truth, clear and unshakable, outweighed the fear, the judgment, and the exhaustion on her from every angle. As the investigation continued, Emily allowed herself to process the chaos. She had faced a mortal threat, and in those critical moments, she had moved with courage and precision. The intruders had underestimated her, a single mother who, despite exhaustion and fear, had found strength she had not known existed. Her heart still pounded, but a sense of empowerment began to replace the raw terror. She had survived. She had acted. She had protected what mattered most. Marcus arrived shortly after the police had finished their preliminary work. His presence brought Emily a strange sense of reassurance. He evaluated the scene with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained countless individuals for moments like this. "You did everything right," he said, his voice steady. "Your composure, your timing, your ability to act under pressure. It saved your life. Saved Lily's life. Not many people could do what you just did." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. It was both a comfort and a stark reminder of the reality they now faced. The danger wasn't over. The next hours passed in a blur. Police took statements, dusted for fingerprints, and documented the scene. Reporters began arriving, their cameras flashing, their questions rapid fire. Emily answered them cautiously, explaining the events without exaggeration, without embellishment. The story spread quickly. A single mother had faced armed intruders and emerged victorious. Some called her a hero, others questioned her actions. Emily paid little attention. The important truth, the seconds that had determined survival, was hers, unshaken by public opinion. Exhaustion finally claimed Emily in the early morning hours. She checked on Lily one last time before curling up on the couch, the weight of adrenaline giving way to deep, bone-weary fatigue. Her thoughts drifted to the moments of the attack. Rico pressing the gun to her head, the precise split-second decisions, the instinctive actions that had turned fear into survival. She replayed the sequence endlessly, marveling at her own courage and the life-saving clarity that had emerged in the darkest moment. Even as sleep threatened, Emily's mind remained alert. The world outside her apartment was unpredictable, dangerous, and unforgiving. She knew the Iron Fangs would not easily forget the woman who had thwarted them. Every shadow, every noise could signal a return, and she would be ready. But she also allowed herself a moment of triumph. She had faced a mortal threat, and in the brief span of seconds, she had acted decisively, courageously, and successfully. That moment, those seconds, had changed everything. By sunrise, Emily was awake again, staring out the window at the quiet street. The black pickup truck had not returned, but her vigilance had not waned. The events of the night had cemented a new reality. Ordinary life, as she had known it, was over. Yet, in that terrifying clarity, Emily discovered strength. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to act despite it. She had acted. She had survived. And she had protected her daughter. The first rays of sunlight touched the apartment, casting long shadows across the floor. Emily cleaned and secured the house, ensuring that every precaution was taken for Lily's safety. She reflected on the precious seconds that had defined the night. The split-second decision to shift her body, the controlled aim, the timing of the shots. Those moments had been terrifying, but they had been decisive. She had transformed fear into action, chaos into control, and threat into survival. As she prepared breakfast for Lily, Emily felt a quiet sense of resolve settle in her chest. The ordeal had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of character. The seconds that had decided life and death had also revealed her inner strength. Emily knew that the days ahead would be fraught with challenges, media scrutiny, police investigations, and the psychological aftermath of trauma. But she also knew she was stronger than she had ever imagined. She had faced death and won. By mid-morning, Emily and Lily shared a quiet breakfast, the world outside still unaware of the full gravity of what had occurred. Emily smiled at her daughter, brushing back a lock of hair and feeling the warmth of a life preserved. The seconds that had mattered most were over, but their impact would echo forever. Emily had acted decisively. She had survived. She had protected Lily. And in those brief, terrifying moments, she had discovered a courage that would define the rest of her life. The days following the invasion were a surreal blur for Emily Carter. The adrenaline that had carried her through the attack had faded, replaced by exhaustion, lingering fear, and the weight of public attention. Police officers continued to visit her apartment, questioning neighbors, gathering evidence, and piecing together the chain of events. Each visit reminded Emily of the fine line between survival and tragedy, a line she had crossed in seconds with precision, instinct, and courage. Emily found herself replaying the attack endlessly in her mind. The split-second decisions, the aim, the controlled firing, everything that had saved her life, and Lily's was now part of her memory, vivid and unshakable. Yet she couldn't escape the mental toll. Nights were the hardest. Every creak of the floor, every gust of wind against the window, sparked the same adrenaline rush she had experienced the night of the attack. Sleep became a rare commodity, and even when she drifted off, dreams carried her back to that terrifying night. Marcus visited frequently, offering guidance and reassurance. "You did exactly what you were trained to do," he said during one visit, surveying the living room where the confrontation had taken place. "Your composure under pressure saved lives. But now, the focus is recovery. You can't fight trauma with adrenaline forever. You need to heal, too." Emily nodded, appreciating his words, but she felt a strange duality, relief for surviving and a persistent unease that danger could return at any moment. The media arrived shortly after the police left, turning Emily's private ordeal into a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside the apartment complex, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward her face whenever she stepped outside. Social media buzzed with opinions, ranging from admiration to harsh judgment. Some hailed her as a hero, praising her courage and quick thinking. Others criticized her for possessing a firearm and using lethal force, questioning whether her actions had been justified. Emily tried to ignore the noise, focusing on Lily and the household routines. Every morning she ensured the doors and windows were secure. Every evening she reviewed her mental drills, and every night she watched over her daughter as she slept. Yet she couldn't entirely shut out the outside world. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers expressed concern, advice, and curiosity, adding to the weight of the situation. Emily realized that survival was no longer just about the seconds of immediate danger. It was about navigating the aftermath, public opinion, and her own lingering fears. The police investigation intensified as evidence was gathered. Emily provided statements, identifying the weapons used, the points of entry, and her actions during the attack. Investigators praised her for her composure and accuracy under pressure, noting that her decisions had directly prevented serious injury or death. Yet Emily couldn't shake the feeling that every word she spoke was being scrutinized for judgment. Every action measured against some invisible standard. Survival, it seemed, came with its own complications. At home, Emily tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. She cooked meals for Lily, helped with homework, and even attempted to watch a television show for distraction. But the invasion had changed everything. Her ordinary life, quiet mornings, carefree afternoons, and peaceful nights had been replaced by vigilance, preparation, and psychological weight. Every decision was now informed by potential danger, every moment of calm a temporary illusion. She could not return to the woman she had been before the attack. Despite the chaos, Emily found solace in small victories. Lily's laughter returned gradually, and the routines of school, homework, and play offered brief reprieves from fear. Emily's confidence in her own capabilities grew with each passing day. She had faced a mortal threat and emerged victorious. The seconds that had determined life and death now fueled a sense of empowerment. Emily understood, more deeply than ever, that courage was not the absence of fear. It was action in the face of it. Marcus encouraged her to channel her experience into preparation for the future. "Teach what you've learned," he suggested one evening. "Other women can benefit from your knowledge. Not everyone will have seconds to make decisions like you did." You can help them be ready. Emily considered his words carefully. Perhaps this ordeal, terrifying as it had been, could serve a larger purpose. Perhaps the fear and trauma she experienced could be transformed into empowerment for herself, her daughter, and others. Emily's interactions with the media became a delicate balancing act. She spoke cautiously, sharing enough to inspire, but not so much as to invite judgment or scrutiny. She emphasized self-defense, preparation, and mental readiness, without sensationalizing the attack. The public's perception of her shifted over time, from curiosity and skepticism to admiration and respect. Emily realized that her story was no longer just her own. It was becoming a beacon of resilience for those who feared violence, crime, or the unknown. Emotionally, the aftermath was complex. Emily grappled with guilt, relief, pride, and lingering fear simultaneously. She had survived, yet she knew others might not have been as fortunate. She had acted decisively in seconds, saving her daughter's life, yet the experience left scars invisible to the outside world. Therapy sessions helped her process the trauma, providing a space to confront fear, guilt, and hypervigilance. Emily learned that survival was not only about action, but also about healing, about reclaiming life, without letting trauma define her entirely. Friends and neighbors began to offer support in quiet, meaningful ways. Meals were left on her doorstep, offers to help with childcare, and simple words of encouragement became small lifelines. Emily realized that community could be as powerful a shield as any weapon. Despite the chaos of the invasion and the glare of public attention, there were people who cared, who recognized her courage, and who offered tangible support. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection and trust could provide strength. Slowly, Emily began to reclaim her life. The intrusive thoughts, the nightly vigilance, and the media attention gradually receded into a manageable backdrop. She continued her training, not out of fear alone, but out of recognition that preparedness was empowering. She spoke with Marcus regularly, discussing new strategies, mental exercises, and ways to remain alert without being consumed by anxiety. Emily's confidence deepened, grounded in the knowledge that she had survived the ultimate test, the invasion that had pressed a gun to her head and demanded every ounce of courage she possessed. In those quiet moments, Emily reflected on the transformative power of the event. Fear had sharpened her instincts, focus had guided her actions, and courage had ensured survival. The seconds that had defined life and death now offered lessons far beyond the immediate threat. Emily's story was no longer just about survival. It was about resilience, empowerment, and the ability to act decisively in the face of danger. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a model of courage under pressure. By the end of the week, Emily felt a subtle shift within herself. The panic and dread that had once dominated her thoughts were replaced by a measured confidence. She moved through her home with awareness rather than fear, taught Lily about simple safety measures without terrorizing her, and began speaking cautiously about her experience to those willing to listen. Emily understood that life would never return to its previous ordinary state. But she had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that she could face danger, act decisively, and protect those she loved. The weeks following the invasion blurred together as Emily Carter found herself navigating a world she had never expected to confront: legal proceedings, public scrutiny, and media attention that refused to fade. The Iron Fangs had been caught thanks to a combination of forensic evidence and the detailed statements Emily had provided. The trial was imminent, and the reality of reliving those harrowing seconds pressed on her with unrelenting weight. The courtroom was a stark contrast to her home. The polished wooden panels, rows of seats, and the hushed murmurs of spectators created an environment that felt both alien and suffocating. Emily sat with Lily beside her, holding her hand tightly. Her mother's presence, unwavering and supportive, reminded her that she was not alone. The trial wasn't just about justice. It was about the seconds that had saved a life, the courage that had faced death, and the scrutiny that would try to judge her actions in a controlled, detached environment. The prosecution wasted no time in establishing the narrative of the Iron Fang's aggression. Videos of their previous crimes, testimonies from other victims, and surveillance footage painted the gang as ruthless and violent. Emily listened intently, noting that every piece of evidence reinforced what she had already known. They had intended harm, and only her decisive action had prevented tragedy. Her hands trembled slightly under the table, but she focused on Lily and the knowledge that the truth would prevail. When it was Emily's turn to testify, the courtroom seemed to shrink around her. Every eye was on her, every word hanging in the air like fragile glass. She recounted the events with precise clarity. The black pickup, the sounds in the night, the moment Rico pressed the gun to her head, and the controlled actions she had taken in those critical seconds. Her voice wavered at times, but the undercurrent of determination and resilience was unmistakable. Each detail, each pause, underscored the reality. She had acted decisively, not recklessly. The defense attempted to undermine her credibility, questioning her training, her use of the firearm, and her ability to accurately recall the events under pressure. Emily held her ground, relying on the rehearsed confidence she had developed during weeks of preparation with Marcus. "I acted in the moment," she said calmly, meeting the gaze of the attorneys. "Every decision I made was to protect my daughter and myself. Those seconds mattered. They determined life and death. I responded as I was trained and as instinct demanded." Outside the courtroom, news crews waited eagerly. Emily had become a symbol, a single mother who had faced armed criminals and survived. Interviews, articles, and televised segments recounted her story, often highlighting her courage and composure under extreme pressure. Emily spoke cautiously, emphasizing preparation, awareness, and the importance of mental readiness rather than the violence itself. "It's not about guns or heroism," she would later tell a reporter. "It's about recognizing danger, staying calm, and acting decisively when every second counts." The trial was grueling. Days were consumed with testimonies, cross-examinations, and forensic details. Emily found herself reliving the attack repeatedly, each recollection precise and vivid. Yet with each session, her confidence grew. She understood the power of her testimony. She was not only seeking justice, but also sharing a model of resilience and courage. The seconds that had defined her life were no longer private moments. They were lessons in survival, determination, and unwavering focus. During a break in the proceedings, Emily reflected on the transformation she had undergone. The fear and vulnerability that had gripped her weeks ago had evolved into strength, clarity, and purpose. She had faced death, acted decisively, and emerged victorious. Now she was facing the world on a broader stage, proving that courage and preparation could overcome even the most terrifying circumstances. Each step into the courtroom reinforced her resolve. She would not be defined by fear, but by the decisive actions that had preserved life. Marcus continued to support her through the trial, offering guidance and reassurance. "Remember," he said, "you are the voice of those seconds. Your courage matters, not just for you, but for everyone who could face a similar threat. Speak clearly, stay calm, and never doubt the actions that saved your life." Emily internalized every word, drawing strength from the knowledge that her experience had meaning beyond her own survival. As the trial progressed, Emily noticed subtle changes in public perception. Initially, some had questioned her actions, suggesting overreaction or recklessness. But as the evidence mounted, as her testimony conveyed clarity, precision, and reasoned judgment, admiration grew. Community members began expressing support. Letters of encouragement arrived at her apartment, and neighbors spoke with quiet pride about the mother who had faced extraordinary danger. Emily realized that her ordeal had transcended personal survival. It had become a story of empowerment and resilience for countless others. The final day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was tense with anticipation. The prosecution summarized the case, emphasizing the calculated threat posed by the Iron Fangs and the critical seconds during which Emily acted decisively. The defense attempted one last challenge, questioning the necessity of her actions. Emily remained poised, her confidence unwavering. She recalled Marcus's words, "Courage is action in the presence of fear." She had lived those words once and was ready to testify to them again if necessary. The verdict was delivered, guilty on all counts. The Iron Fangs would face years in prison, their plan thwarted by the quick thinking and bravery of one determined woman. Emily felt a profound sense of relief and triumph. Justice had been served, and the seconds that had defined her life had been vindicated. She hugged Lily tightly, feeling the weight of months of fear and uncertainty lift, replaced by a deep, enduring sense of accomplishment and security. In the aftermath, Emily became more than a survivor. She became a symbol of courage and resilience. Community organizations invited her to speak about self-defense, situational awareness, and mental preparation. Articles and interviews highlighted not only her heroism, but also the lessons she had learned, the importance of vigilance, training, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. Emily understood that the story of those seconds, though terrifying, could inspire and educate others. Even as her life began to stabilize, Emily remained vigilant. The invasion had changed her, leaving an indelible mark on her psyche. She continued her training, refined her home security, and maintained the mental exercises that had kept her calm during the attack. Yet she also embraced moments of normalcy with Lily, laughter, school activities, and quiet evenings together. Emily had learned that survival required both preparedness and the courage to reclaim life even after trauma. The seconds that had once been defined by fear and uncertainty were now etched in Emily's memory as moments of clarity, decisiveness, and resilience. She had faced death, acted with courage, and emerged victorious. Those brief, terrifying moments had transformed her, revealing strength and determination she had never known. Emily Carter was no longer just a survivor. She was a mother, a hero, and a symbol of courage in the face of unimaginable danger. Months had passed since the Iron Fangs were convicted, yet Emily Carter's life remained forever changed. The fear, the adrenaline, and the uncertainty that had dominated those nights were now tempered by reflection, resilience, and a profound sense of purpose. Every morning, as sunlight streamed through the blinds of her apartment, Emily felt the weight of what had transpired, the moments when mere seconds had determined life or death, and the courage she had summoned in the face of danger. Emily had learned that survival was not accidental. It was the product of preparation, awareness, and the ability to act decisively when fear threatened to paralyze. She continued her training with Marcus, refining her skills, practicing mental drills, and reinforcing the instincts that had kept her and Lily alive. The exercises were no longer solely about physical defense. They were about confidence, mindfulness, and the calm decisiveness that transformed terror into action. Emily now understood that preparedness was not just protection, it was empowerment. Lily's life, too, had been subtly transformed. The child sensed the quiet strength in her mother, the calm beneath the surface, and the unshakable vigilance that protected her. Emily taught Lily basic safety measures in a way that was gentle and reassuring, emphasizing awareness without instilling fear. There were bedtime talks, playful drills, and small lessons in observation, each a thread weaving courage, wisdom, and trust into their daily life. Lily's laughter returned fully, no longer overshadowed by fear, and Emily found comfort in her daughter's resilience. The media attention gradually faded, But Emily's story continued to inspire others. She received invitations to speak at community events, self-defense seminars, and local schools. Her message was consistent. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Seconds matter. Decisions matter. Life can change in an instant, and preparedness, both mental and physical, can mean the difference between survival and tragedy. Emily embraced this role with humility, recognizing that her experience was both a burden and a gift, a lesson in resilience that she could share with the world. The psychological aftermath of the invasion remained a part of Emily's daily life. Hypervigilance, occasional nightmares, and moments of acute anxiety surfaced unexpectedly. Therapy sessions helped her process these lingering effects, providing tools to reclaim control over her thoughts and emotions. She learned to channel fear into preparedness rather than paralysis, anxiety into mindfulness rather than chaos. Slowly, Emily discovered that her trauma, while profound, could coexist with empowerment, purpose, and hope. The community around her continued to offer support. Neighbors who had once whispered about the frightening night now greeted her with admiration and respect. Friends checked in regularly, and local organizations sought her advice on safety and awareness programs. Emily realized that her experience had created ripples far beyond her own life. Her actions in those critical seconds had not only saved her and Lily, but had also provided a blueprint for courage, preparation, and decisive action to countless others. At home, Emily created a space of resilience and safety. She installed additional security measures, mapped escape routes, and maintained routines that balanced vigilance with normalcy. Yet her home was no longer just a physical space. It had become a symbol of survival, courage, and empowerment. Every corner, every light, every precaution reminded her of the moments when seconds had defined her fate, and every measure reinforced her determination to protect her family. Emily also began documenting her experience in writing, carefully recounting the events, her thoughts, and the lessons she had learned. The act of writing was therapeutic, a way to process trauma and transform fear into a narrative of strength. Each sentence reflected her courage. Each chapter explored the decisions and instincts that had kept her alive. She hoped her story would inspire others to face danger with awareness and confidence, to recognize that even ordinary people can summon extraordinary courage when the stakes are life itself. Friends and family watched Emily transform before their eyes. The woman who had once trembled at shadows now moved with quiet confidence, eyes alert but calm, hands steady and heart resilient. She no longer feared the world outside, but respected its unpredictability. Emily understood that life could always present moments of danger, but she had discovered an unshakable inner strength, a wellspring of courage that would guide her and Lily through any future challenge. On quiet evenings, Emily would sit by the window, looking out at the city streets, reflecting on the journey that had reshaped her life. She remembered the moment Rico had pressed a gun to her head, the seconds when fear threatened to overwhelm her, and the clarity that had allowed her to act decisively. Those moments, though terrifying, had revealed something essential about her character: the ability to transform fear into action, vulnerability into strength, and chaos into control. Emily's relationship with Lily grew deeper, grounded in trust, love, and shared resilience. The child sensed her mother's vigilance, but also felt the warmth and security of a protector who had faced unimaginable danger and emerged stronger. Emily's courage became a living example, a quiet lesson in strength, awareness, and the power of decisive action. Together, they reclaimed ordinary joys, laughter, play, and quiet evenings, while carrying with them the extraordinary knowledge of survival. As the months passed, Emily also began mentoring other women in her community, teaching self-defense, situational awareness, and mental preparedness. She emphasized that empowerment did not come from fear, but from readiness, awareness, and confidence in one's own instincts. Her story, once a private ordeal, had become a public message of resilience. The seconds that had once defined life or death had become lessons in courage, preparation, and unwavering determination. One evening, as Emily tucked Lily into bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The invasion, the split-second decisions, the trial, and the public scrutiny had transformed her life in ways she could never have anticipated. Yet through fear, chaos, and uncertainty, she had discovered her inner strength. She had acted decisively when it mattered most, protected her daughter, and emerged not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of courage. Emily kissed Lily's forehead and whispered a promise. "No matter what happens, I will protect you. I will face whatever comes, and I will always act." The words were simple, yet profound, echoing the lessons she had learned in those seconds that had defined her life. Emily Carter, the woman who had faced death with a gun pressed to her head, had transformed fear into action, danger into empowerment, and chaos into a life filled with courage, resilience, and love. In the end, Emily realized that the seconds of terror had not only preserved life, but had also forged character. She had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. She had learned that preparation, awareness, and decisive action could turn vulnerability into strength. And she had learned that even in the darkest moments, light, in the form of love, resilience, and courage, could guide the way. Life would never be exactly the same, but Emily Carter had emerged stronger, wiser, and more courageous than ever before. The moments that had pressed a gun to her head were now immortalized in her mind as the catalyst for a new life, one defined by empowerment, purpose, and the unshakable bond between a mother and her child. The world remained unpredictable, but Emily was ready, every second of every day, to face it with courage, clarity, and unwavering determination.